Hello everyone, this is Kansai Dorito, and this is the third episode of Girls Frontline 2 Explained, where we talk about the girls, their skills, and some of their backgrounds to get you caught up. Today we're going to talk about Vepley, aka Vepr12, aka Russian Barbara with a gun. Vepley is the first brand new character we're going to go over, and if her absolutely adorable appearance and flashy photogenic conduct wasn't an indicator, she's an idol, or at least she was an idol for the URNC, but joined our squads and refuses to drop her bubbly demeanor in the field of battle. Vepley has an infectiously positive personality, smiling and winking her way into the heart of everyone she meets, including her enemies, but she's not all looks and smiles. Her most defining feature being her absolutely ludicrous strength, which she uses to pack mule supplies without a care in the world, but combined with her general ditziness, she tends to drop large shipments, much to the chagrin of the alcoholic lolly Mei Ling. Her backpack is Mr. Pizza, and she acts as his guardian, treasuring and protecting him even though he probably doesn't even like pizza. Her weapon of choice is the Vepr12, a semi-auto 12-gauge shotgun manufactured by Molotov Rouge in Kirov Oblast, Russia. Starting production in 2003, this beast is based on the RPK, a machine gun variant of the most popular gun in the history of the world, the AK-47.
Shit. Jesus Christ. Why'd you give me this fucking thing? I thought this was airsoft. I'm never doing that again in my life.
Because for some reason, every gun made in Russia after 1947 is based on the AK. The Vepr12's large size, modularity, reliable gas system, and overabundance of special ammo types make it a monster in urban close-quarters combat. And because of this bubbly idle shotgun has seen three of the most defining conflicts of our time, with confirmed use in the war in Afghanistan, the Iraq War, and the Syrian Civil War, and is even assumed to be in use right now, right this second, in the Russo-Ukrainian War. To keep things light, I'm going to scurry on past its current use and possible war crimes and just talk about the gun. It was invented to compete with the ever-popular Saiga 12, another shotgun based on the AK, but with minor improvements, such as letting you put the mag in normally instead of the weird tilt and shove method normal AK pattern weapons need. Chrome-lined internals making it super reliable and corrosion resistant, Picatinny rails, removable folding stock, and finally a threaded barrel to customize the weapon for basically any situation. Unfortunately, our dear Vepley would get owned hard in the sales department because of its price tag. Despite being a better weapon than its competitor, the Saiga is good enough, and cheaper, so the Vepr12 is only really available to troops with the freedom to choose, like Special Forces. And funnily enough, the civilian market, where gun nuts and competitive shooters absolutely decimate at ranges and competition alike. The Vepr12 can take a plethora of attachments, thanks to its intentionally easy to mod design, allowing for cool stuff like sights, stendo mags, fucking drums for fat juicy mag dumps, and goddamned shotgun suppressors. Now I know, some of you fucking gun purists are rolling your eyes, but just for you preachy assholes, here's a fucking gorgeous, delicious, sexy fucking Vepr12 in wood furniture, fixed stock, reasonable stendo, and a sweet ass muzzle brake. Oh shit, my bad. Like I was saying, the Vepr12 was not a commercial success, and its parent company would eventually go bankrupt and is still staving off their financial woes to this day. On that depressing note, let's cheer up and learn about all the ways Vepley can make you smile by moving on to her skills, cons, and upgrades. Her passive is Idle Talent, which has 4 effects. The first one gives her 1 confectance point for free at the start of your turn. Every turn. Easy. Simple. Doesn't take a PhD to understand. The second effect gives her a confectance point for every enemy she hits with an attack. Now, I know it says it gives 1 for every instance of damage, but that's kind of a loaded statement. After testing, instance of damage means enemies hit and not number of hits. I noticed her basic attack is 2 instances of damage since she shoots twice, and both shots come out one after the other, but she only gets 1 confectance point for it. And I'm pretty sure that was the intention. 2 confectance points from a basic attack is stupid busted, especially when you consider she already gets 1 at the start of every turn. However, with her bomb, I hit 4 enemies and got 4 confectance points for doing so, making that attack completely free. So just for simplicity's sake, she gets 1 point for each enemy she hits with her attacks. The third part of her passive increases damage dealt to enemies with movement debuffs by 20%. And finally, the fourth part of her passive applies movement down 2 to any enemy she hits for 2 turns before attacking, synergizing with a 20% increased damage against movement impaired enemies, but only if she's moved 5 or more tiles on the turn of the attack. This means you want to keep Vepley mobile. 20% increased damage and a free debuff are too strong to pass up and let Vepley absolutely thrash enemies, single or clumped. Her C4 lowers the required movement for the debuff from 5 tiles to 3, making it a basically guaranteed proc and allowing you to put Vepley in safer areas so you don't have to overextend as much to get the debuff off. And her C5 adds a new effect. If Vepley would apply movement down to an enemy who already has a movement debuff, she instead applies movement denied, which roots an enemy wherever they're standing for 1 turn. Alright, now that we know what her passive does, we can move on to her basic attack, Live Interaction, and it's as basic as they come. 80% of her attack to one enemy within her standard range, which in this case is 5 tiles. But because of her unique set of skills, you'll almost never use this, and I'll elaborate on that statement when we get to this skill. Her first skill is All Out Performance, a 2-turn cooldown 3x5 AoE that you can shoot out in the cardinal directions only, that deals 75% of her attack to the first enemy in line, knocking them back 4 tiles in the direction of the attack and destroying any destructible cover not immediately next to Vepley in range of the attack. Now, that last part could use some explaining, so I'll do my best. The actual skill says destroys any destructible cover outside the 3x3 tile area around the user. But what it should say is it destroys destructible cover in the AoE except for the very first row. I'm assuming this was implemented to stop Vepley from blowing up her own cover when using this skill, but that line seriously confused me until I actually went in and tested it. Her C1 gives the skill a new effect. Whenever she hits 2 or more enemies with it, she gets 3 tiles of additional movement, letting her take riskier positions to attack and then fall back to nearby cover so you don't have to ever choose between the best attack and the smartest attack. The last skill, and the one I was referring to earlier, is Exclusive Stage, which deals 150% of her attack within 5 tiles to 1 target, and if the target isn't behind cover, it clears 2 buffs before Vepley attacks. It does all of this for 1 Confectance point. Yeah. At such a low cost, and with such a large damage improvement over her basic attack, as far as anyone is concerned, this is her basic attack. Especially when you consider that she gets a free Confectance point at the start of each round. With 150% of her attack, great movement, and that 20% buff from her passive, Vepley absolutely pulverizes enemies, and can keep pulverizing enemies throughout an encounter, keeping consistent high damage on scattered targets with her great movement, making her exceptional as a pick character. She's still no Tololo, but I don't have Tololo, and it's probably going to be a while until I get her since I'm using my standard banner guarantee on a QJ dupe, and Tololo doesn't drop from anywhere else. C2 only furthers the carnage, making it a guaranteed crit on top of the 20% buff from her passive, turning Vepley into Elid Doom Guy. Her ultimate is one of my favorite skills in the game. Infectious Enthusiasm is an untargeted bomb with a 2-tile AoE blast that deals 100% of her attack and applies Overzealous, a debuff that increases the damage they take from Vepley by 30%, and Vulnerable 2, a 20% universal vulnerability. But like I mentioned earlier, you get a Confectance point for each enemy you hit, meaning if you hit a minimum of 3 enemies with each bomb, you can throw them indefinitely. And this is where I'm going to mention her absolutely incredible synergy with Cheetah, or MP7. Cheetah has a bomb she can follow up with, consistent healing for Vepley, who tends to take a lot of damage due to her roaming playstyle, great buffs that Vepley takes full advantage of with her high base multipliers, and a great action support that helps Vepley get breaks on enemies to further increase that damage. If you want more info about Cheetah, I've got a video on her too. Now that we know what Vepley's skills do, let's take a look at her nodes. Luckily, her first node is pretty good. Safe Viewing Distance increases stability damage by 2 points on enemies with movement debuffs, which you and I both know Vepley applies with ease. Containment Zone Tour is a bit weird. It exchanges her 3x5 all-out performance range for a 5x3, letting her hit up to 5 enemies if they're all in a line, and lowering her absolutely ludicrous knockback of 4 tiles to 1 tile. I personally don't use this because blowing enemies off edges is hilarious and very effective. Fortune of an Idol gives her 1 stack of Quick Barrier, lowering the first attack she takes after receiving the buff by 60% if there's no allies within 6 tiles, and really enforces that one-man army Vepley playstyle, giving her a big bump in survivability if you choose to take her that route. Dino Dash increases the damage of Exclusive Stage, letting her ignore 10% of the damage reduction from cover against enemies with movement debuffs, giving her a very decent damage increase to her best skill. Stress Resistance training is niche, reducing AoE damage she takes if she's not in cover. I definitely skip over this one since AoEs from enemies don't tend to hurt too much, and Vepley has amazing mobility, letting her get out of the way of basically every telegraphed AoE. Her last node is Stage Commitment, giving her a free instance of damage, dealing 15% of her attack to large enemies when she applies her movement debuff. This isn't half bad. It definitely helps her when she's in the thick of it and needs to blow an elite spine out of their torso, and gives her a slight improvement when she fights bosses. Her capstone is Heart-Melting Strike, which increases the damage a unit deals by 7% if they have more movement, making it basically a free 7% damage increase on Vepley, and definitely on sword characters, which need all the help they can get. In terms of weapons, Vepley is a bit spoiled for choice. 5 great shotguns to choose from, all with their own strengths. And then Mezzaluna. But to keep things consistent, we'll start with the SRs. The M1 Super 90 has the highest base damage of the SRs, and increased damage by 10% for every confectance point she spends up to 20%, letting Vepley absolutely rip and tear with a constant 20% damage buff for doing something she already does anyway. Not to mention looking really good with it. But if you want her to hold her Vepr 12, you can always paint it. This is her best SR option by far. Vepley really takes that high base damage and 20% buff and runs with it. The Spaz 12, or the Sportivo Calibro 12, increases active skill damage by 5 to 10% after receiving healing, adding another 5 to 10% if the heal takes her over max to half HP, all number ranges depending on calibration. This shotgun is definitely a great option if you don't have the M1 Super 90, and is basically just as good as it if you do the Cheetah Vepley roam combo. The SR Vepr 12 is kind of a dud, sharing the same lower base damage as the Spaz 12 and giving you 2 random buffs at the start of your actions. Flipping between giving a 10% damage buff to single target and AoE damage for one, and confectant skill and cooldown skill damage for the other. This randomness leads to very inconsistent damage, and while sometimes the Vepr 12 buffs exactly what you're gonna use, it'll only ever be as good as the M1 Super 90's constant damage buff. Speaking of dud shotguns, we have the Mezzaluna, which has the highest base damage of any shotgun currently in the game, and a nice 15% attack buff on top of that. It also looks pretty rad, but unfortunately, that's about where its Vepley compatibility ends. Its effect recovers an additional 2 points of stability whenever you recover stability, but only while she's stability broken. And if her stability is above 10 to 6 points, it increases damage dealt by 20 to 40%, and at the end of her action, it applies a 10 to 20% attack debuff to the 1 to 2 closest enemies within 6 to 10 tiles for 1 turn. Now, that's a lot of stuff, but let me break down the good and the bad. The extra 2 stability healing after a break is nice, but Vepley can't restore stability to herself. The 20 to 40% increase above 10 to 6 stability is also nice, but Vepley's gonna get hit. A lot. And even Suomi, God bless her soul, won't be able to keep her above that threshold. The attack down isn't bad at all, and honestly increases her survivability, especially if she's in deep by herself, but it's just not enough. While survivability is definitely something you have to stay mindful of, this shotgun is definitely better suited to someone else. The Expeditionary Pigeon is only available via the Battle Pass and has the lowest base attack of the SSRs, but 2 very good effects. Its first effect increases damage to enemies by 15 to 30% if their stability is either full or empty, making the solo Infiltrator Vepley playstyle more viable. And on the other end, it applies stability imbalance 1 to 2 to the target for 1 to 3 turns on the 3 to 2 turn cooldown, letting Vepley apply a continuous stability debuff on enemies if the calibration level is 5 or above. This is particularly good on bosses, and especially on bosses that regenerate stability often, like Dehraf. The Pigeon is definitely a decent choice, but definitely not her best, and in most scenarios, not better than the Super 90. The Heartseeker is, in my opinion, the best option currently available. Second highest base damage among the current shotguns and a 30% confectance boost, which increases the damage of all attacks that use confectance points. The Heartseeker has 3 effects that are all great for Vepley. The first deals 10 to 20% of her attack as fixed damage whenever she deals active skill damage. The second effect increases the damage to targets with movement debuffs by 10 to 20%. And finally, the third applies a 10 to 20% damage reductions for 1 to 2 turns before they deal damage to her. This effect can only happen once per turn unless it's max calibration, in which case it can happen an infinite amount of times. This shotgun is definitely her best in slot and does everything she wants. If you're a Vepley diehard, go for it. It's a substantially better shotgun than the Super 90. But if I'm gonna level with you, Vepley is a powerful character worthy of being picked, loved, and enjoyed without it. And hopefully by this point I've convinced you. And if not, I'm gonna show you how great my Vepley is. So today, we're actually just going to do a scenario, since I feel like that'll better show Vepley off instead of just using exclusive stage on the boss twice and killing them instantly. So today we're going to be using Suomi for sustain, Latara for AoE, Cheetah for buffs, and of course Vepley. So we're going to do a standard Cheetah start and use Surprise Box while everyone's clumped, then we're going to use a Vepley bomb to start off with a big burst of damage. We're going to move her past cover to make sure her passive procs, and with that secure 2 early kills. Now that Vepley is completely exposed, she's very likely going to take a ton of damage, so we're going to move Suomi in and use her ultimate to keep Vepley alive. Now, since Suomi's ultimate damage isn't going to kill them, we're going to have Latara mow down the destructible cover to ensure that we have good angles against the enemies no matter where they move on their turn. Since Vepley got taunted, we're going to have to use Latara's ult to free her, but first we're going to chase down their sniper with Suomi. Now that Vepley's free to move, we're going to kill the last enemy with spicy candy to let Vepley walk up to the last group of enemies. And since her last bomb hit 4 enemies last time, we could just throw another one and close out the mission. And just like that, Vepley clears the stage using the power of domestic terrorism and teamwork. Now that you know the ins and outs of Vepley, you've earned your Vepley certification from Vepley Technical Institute. If this is your first time watching one of my videos, thank you. And if you're a returning viewer, thank you even more. When I uploaded the Nagant video, I had 5 subs. When I released the Cheetah video, I had just over 100. At the time of making this video, I have over 2,000, and if I'm being honest, it's completely floored me. The overwhelming positive reception to my content has been an absolute dream, and I'm so grateful for each and every one of you. I appreciate you all so much that I'm never going to mention my subscriber count ever again. Your time is too important to listen to me babble about random crap. Oh wait. Jokes aside, if you think I got something wrong, please leave a comment. Despite the massive surge in commenters, I still read every single one, and plan on doing so indefinitely. I read a lot of comments from you guys requesting different girls to review, and the winner by far was Ksenia and her Stechkin, so she's next. I want to thank you all one last time, and I'll hopefully see you all in the next video. Stay strapped.
Friedrich Steiner. This is the end.
I know you. Vorkuta. You don't know what we did to you.
Mason, talk to me.
Your evil has claimed the lives of many good men. No longer.
Killing me will not stop Nova.
I do not care about Nova. My name is Victor Reznov. And I will have my revenge!
I've got a Vepr 12. Welcome to the watermelon fields, boy. Woo! Yeah!